Hey there, everyone. I'm back with another episode of CXO Conversations. If you're new to the series, welcome. My name is Klaudia Tirico, and I'm the editor of Demand Gen Report. I'm so excited to have Vinay Bhagat, CEO of TrustRadius, with me in the hot seat today. Hi, Vinay. How are you? Thanks for taking the time.
I'm awesome. Thank you, Claudia. Glad to be with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. So let's kick things off right away. TrustRadius is a leading software reviews and services provider. Tell me a little bit about just the overall importance and the benefits of having, software user reviews for B2B buyers as they're navigating this, purchasing journey during, these crazy times.
I think for a long time, buyers have sought the truth about a product before they buy. They want to go into a relationship with their eyes wide open. I think in these modern times, post-COVID-19 and working from home, that's ever more important. They don't get to sit down with their colleagues at an event. They don't get to meet a salesperson face to face. And so being able to, understand the whole truth from their peers is absolutely critical.
Great. Yeah. And I mean, of course, I imagine this new environment has really led to an increase in traffic to TrustRadius, since face-to-face meetings and events are off the table for the time being. So what other changes have you seen since COVID hit for TrustRadius, and how are B2B organizations really relying on review sites now to fuel their demand gen efforts?
Yeah, we certainly saw a surge of traffic with COVID. Obviously, there was a disproportionate surge in certain categories that, like, web conferencing and security software that people were in immediate need of. That has dissipated now, and it's kind of returned to normal. But what we are seeing is much higher time on site, as a lot of people are spending a lot of time digging in, really researching products, really comparing them side by side. In fact, we've seen that the average person using our site spends over 11 minutes just comparing two products side by side, which is pretty amazing in internet time. Now, what does it mean for a vendor? It means that in a world that is now really digital first, they have to have a presence where their buyers go to shop. The good news is that there aren't too many venues that they need to think about, but there are probably 3 or so venues that buyers are now going to do their due diligence before they buy. And it's critical that vendors are well represented, that they've got a critical mass of reviews such that buyers can find people they can relate to, such that they have their story being told in the most effective way possible. And the other big opportunity is, frankly, all of the engagement and data opportunities that come from review platforms. We sit on huge amounts of data about buyer interest. I like to analogize, if you've ever seen the Tom Cruise movie, The Minority Report, where they have these characters that can predict crimes. I like to say we can predict pipeline, where we have the intelligence to understand when buyers are in market doing research, whether they're serious or just kicking tires, and also what they're looking at, who they're evaluating. So that means a brand can not only know that a buyer is in market, but they can know who to position against, and that's hugely valuable. And then the third aspect is, in a world where trust is the most important currency, review platforms drive high quality content, and there's a terrific opportunity for vendors to take that content and just use it in their own channels. And we've seen that when brands do that, they increase conversion, whether that's on a landing page, a nurture message, or in a sales outreach message. Having the voice of the customer to back up your claims just makes people feel more comfortable and improves conversion.
I love that. And, obviously there are some common and not so common ways that B2B organizations have really leveraged this type of, feedback to better, cater to their buyers' needs. So I'd love to just hear, do you know of any really unique and not so common ways B2B organizations are really taking all of this information and using it to better create just better marketing campaigns in general?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of cool innovation, happening out there right now. So just to give you one example, this whole area of intent data is obviously very hot right now, and there are different sources of intent. There are sources of intent based upon bitstream advertising to be more top of funnel when someone is showing, high level interest in a topic area, maybe a search term. And then there's the type of intent that we have on our platform when someone is actually, I would argue, showing more low to mid funnel intent based upon their browsing history. They're actually comparing products, they're shortlisting products, they're digging in and really understanding, whether a product's going to be good for their use case. All sorts of data are useful, but when you put those data sets together, they can be quite predictive in terms of, how to engage a buyer, whether they're ready to engage or not. So one of the companies we work with, Optimizely, has been feeding that intent data into Drift, an online chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has been on TrustRadius, they will show them a differentiated message that talks to, has a more direct call to action, like book a demo. Whereas if they just come to their website otherwise, they may have a more kind of gentle engagement flow that eases them into working with them. And they found tremendous results by just differentiating like that, personalizing the message based upon the intent data. We're actually doing a webinar this week with WatchGuard, who have been feeding the data into an ABM platform called 6 Sense to do kind of, again, targeted marketing based upon that intent data. That's one area. The other area is just taking the content that you accumulate on review sites and really being religious about testing it in conversion and for engagement. So IBM, the cloud team at IBM has done some fantastic work incorporating review content onto informational pages and onto landing pages. For landing pages, they found a material, 30, 50, 100% improvement in conversion depending on the page. On informational pages, they've just seen a lot more engagement, and they've seen that the engagement from having like a review carousel where you've got sound bites of reviews from maybe 20, 30 reviewers, which a buyer can self-serve and scroll between, tends to create a lot more engagement and a lot more interest than just putting a bunch of brands and logos up there. The reality is that while many tech companies are proud of the great brands they work with, many of the buyers who visit them may not be from such a large, prominent brand. They may be from a mid-market company or an SMB. They may be from a particular kind of vertical. And what they're really looking for is, does this company, does this product work with people like me? And giving them the ability to kind of scroll through testimony from maybe 20, 30, 40 people, and they can one or two that match their profile, dig in and read more, creates just a lot of trust and confidence and gives them, again, the confidence to take a demo, engage in a trial, or take that next step.
That's very interesting. And, obviously we are constantly talking about intent data and how important it has been recently and even prior to the pandemic. So moving along and kind of using all of those insights, I'd love to talk about how, some of your clients or any B2B organizations, how they're repurposing these custom reviews for content creation. But before I get to that, I was just wondering, how can we, as a user, how can I trust that some of these reviews are accurate? Because, at the end of the day, any kind of data, you want it to be accurate, even if it's the intent or anything, in between. So how can people really know that some of the reviews and the feedback and things like that are actually accurate and trustworthy? What does TrustRadius do in that kind of sense?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked, Claudia. I mean, it's really both validating that they're real reviews, first of all, and also controlling for bias that a vendor can introduce into their score as well. So validating that they're real, first of all, to write a review on TrustRadius, you have to either, create a profile with LinkedIn or through your corporate email address. So that's one form of screening. The second is that we have human beings, researchers, who actually read every review before it's published to make sure it's not just been copied from another site, that the person's LinkedIn profile is valid, that even that the IP address of where they're writing their review from matches the location on their LinkedIn handle. So there are a few kind of automated and human-based methods to make sure a review is legitimate. It is possible for fake reviews to kind of sometimes get through the cracks. And that's why we always give vendors the right to dispute a review. We also run sometimes what we call honey trap campaigns, where if we think we've got a cohort of people who've written fraudulent reviews, we create a fake product and we invite them to review it. And if they do, that kind of is a pretty good tell as well. And the reason why fraudulent reviews happen is less vendors trying to create fake reviews to kind of bias their products, but rather because incentives are a common practice in the review industry, you do find people, particularly in developing countries, want to earn the incentive and may not be legitimate customers of the products. And so therefore, these kind of honey trap ideas work pretty well. Now, another big issue in our market is one of bias, where it's quite possible for a brand with thousands of customers just to peel off their 9s and 10s from an NPS scale perspective and encourage them to write reviews on review platforms. And that happens prevalently in my industry. It's a much bigger issue than fraud. And while those are legitimate customers and we are going to publish their reviews, if those are the only reviews we publish, or if we don't do anything to modulate the scores, we're going to have an unlevel playing field where if one vendor has done a better job of tilting the decks versus another, the buyer can't trust the score. So we do two things. One is we independently source about 60% of our reviews and ratings in our platform outside of what brands may do to drive reviews to our site or the work that we do with brands. Secondly, we have an algorithm that heavily overweights independently sourced data. So a review that we source or a rating that we source from our community is going to be weighted more in the algorithm than one that a brand drives to us. We also do have a certification program where we're encouraging vendors to really go to all of their customers to write a review and not just cherry pick. And brands who have adopted those practices and have been vetted to adopt those practices earn what's called a true certification. So if you visit TrustRadius, you'll see a number of brands like, say, Cisco WebEx have earned that true certification where they're giving all customers an equal opportunity to write a review, not just their known promoters.
Awesome. That's great. And now that we have that out of the way and we know that the data is accurate and everything like that, tell me a little bit about, some use cases of how B2B content marketing teams have used reviews to really support their content creation.
So a review may be 400 to 500 words on TrustRadius. In addition, one of the methods that we use to help a brand tell its story is we ask what are called custom questions, where we collaborate typically with the product marketing team to enumerate a set of questions that help the brand tell its story. And we think that's useful for two reasons. One is buyers struggle and the differences between products, and we're trying to help shine a light on those differences. And secondly, it creates much more useful content for the vendor. Now, that being said, people aren't going to read 400 to 500 words until they're getting serious. But they might read a soundbite from a review in a nurture message or an SDR outreach message that is taken from a review. So the first thing that we do is we help brands curate the very best, we like to call them money quotes from their reviews, those real awesome sound bites that they can extract, and they're able to kind of tag them by theme. This is a quote about ROI. This is a quote from a retail client. This is a quote about why someone switched from a competitor. And they're able to build a really robust content library. Then what the brands are able to do then is repurpose those quotes in many different ways. Syndicating them to their website is one strategy, where again, if the content is put onto a landing page, we see on average a 30% improvement in conversion. If it's put on to an informational page, we see just really great engagement. It also helps with SEO because that content from those reviews is now flowing into that page and helping with long tail keyword search rankings. It also becomes a base of content that the sales team can use. So companies take that content and they create cadences for tools like SalesLoft and Outreach and VanillaSoft that are based upon quotes from reviews that they basically provide as templates to their SDRs or BDRs. They also build it into their sales decks and into their nurture strategies. Some companies also will create derivative assets. Some of those might be battle cards that are more internally facing. For example, IBM feeds review data from TrustRadius into a content system called Seismic, which is an internal sales enablement tool. And the sales reps can on the fly then create customer case studies or battle cards based upon the context of who they're selling to and who they're competing against. And then other companies have worked with us to create infographics or what we call key claims reports that validate a claim being made by the vendor. But the simple concept is, if you drive high quality customer voice content in the form of a review, there are numerous ways to kind of cut it up and reuse it in ways that either speak to just one individual in prospecting or to a market at large, when you kind of summarize the voice of the customer in a way that the market, much like an analyst report summarizes what an analyst point of view is, we see a value in summarizing what the customer sentiment is as well.
Very cool. And now, also, that just like kind of got me thinking, how can B2B companies, get the customers to actually leave a review without, kind of nagging and being annoying? Does it kind of work from sales, or does it go, is it like a customer success person's job? Where do you see that kind of working?
It's generally led by the marketing team in conjunction with a platform provider like us. We have kind of three basic methodologies that we use. One is running a campaign, and typically we'll do that on behalf of the brand where they share a customer file. We reach out to those customers with a message that says, we're looking for authentic feedback on behalf of brand X. You'll be rewarded for your time with a small, reward, typically like an Amazon gift card. So people like that. Plus they also, we use language that evokes that they will be helping other people as a result of the review, and they'll be helping the brand learn from the customer feedback. So that's a simple method that really works. It's been shown to work over a long period of time. And we typically see between a 5 and a 10% response rate to a single campaign. Now, you may not be catching someone at the ideal time, so we recommend going back to people periodically if they didn't respond, every 3 to 6 months. Another method is to take what we call an embedded approach. So most brands have multiple touch points with their customers through their application, through their community, through email. And there are ways to constantly remind people that they can give feedback. One of the ways that IBM has seen a lot of great results is using embedded asks inside their actual product. So they use a technology called Braze that can do basically interstitial messages when someone is using their product, and they can control it based upon how frequently someone is logging in or how long someone has been on the platform, etc. So if you want to have reviews just from people who are experienced users of your product versus a first-time user, you can control who sees the message. And they found great value in having kind of, again, a little pop-up interstitial message that's, again, based upon that user's use of their platform. And it's driven a lot of content for them. A simple idea is just what we call a login home page takeover. So when someone first logs into your application, having a simple sort of call out or an ad on that page that asks them to give their feedback. Marketo has found value in incorporating Review Us in their support ticket flow. So when someone goes through support, they have a successful resolution, they answer a support ticket, quick NPS survey, and after that they're then asked if they'd like to write a review in TrustRadius. So we call all of those techniques an embedded approach. They're not going to lead to a big surge in reviews, but they lead to a constant trickle. And it also, just like direct marketing, it reminds someone that you're looking for their feedback and they're going to respond when they have the time or when you give them a compelling reason to respond. And then the third method is physical events and now digital events. We've built a programmatic approach to driving reviews at physical events and used to do that at events like Oracle Open World or SAP Sapphire. Unfortunately, those events aren't happening right now. So digital events, user conferences can be an opportunity to rally reviews. if you are able to capture someone's attention in a digital forum, it might be a way to encourage them to, write a review while they're in the mode of engaging with you as a brand as well. So those are 3 common techniques. In addition to that, certainly arming your CSMs and your salespeople who touch customers to ask people to write reviews. Maybe you complete an executive business review or you just go through a renewal. Those are more of a human-based touch to say, we really appreciate you, renewing with us this year. We'd love you to give us a review as well. So those are more high-touch methods that may, again, drive more low-volume results, but probably high-quality results as well.
That's great. And another just question kind of popped up in my head. What happens when there's a negative review? How should companies really kind of approach a negative review?
Frankly, if you don't have negative reviews, no one's going to trust you. A typical product profile on TrustRadius has a distribution curve. It varies according to product. It even varies according to category. We find that finance and HR people tend to grade products more strictly than marketing people do for some reason. Maybe their personalities are a little bit different. But the reality is that simple, cheap products are going to score better than complex, expensive products. They may not be better, they just are different. But a negative review can mean a few things, right? It could mean it was a poor fit for that customer, or maybe there's a configuration or service issue that company's working through. So if you do get a negative review, the first thing to try and understand is, to validate that customer's claims. So you can comment on a review. We are an open platform. Vendors can comment on the reviews on our site, and acknowledge the customer feedback, and then try and understand, was this, again, a customer we maybe shouldn't have sold to, a bad use case fit, or is there just a service issue or a configuration issue that we can resolve? If it's the latter case, then as soon as that issue has been resolved, you can encourage the customer to update their review. We do that automatically as part of a subscription with TrustRadius. We go back to people to get them to renew their reviews on a periodic basis. But reviews are not static. A reviewer can update their review. So if they had an issue and it was resolved from a vendor, it's quite common for them to go and update their review. But commenting is really critical. There was a study done by TripAdvisor that said that hotel brands that actively engage with reviews and critical comments outperform hotel brands that don't, because people are understanding. They realize that not every experience is going to be perfect. Maybe there was construction going on at a hotel. Maybe that guest wasn't the ideal fit for that hotel, etc. And they just want to know that that brand cares, that they're listening, that they're acknowledging the feedback. And I think they're also discerning enough to understand that, at least in the software world, not every product is a perfect fit for every use case. And that, to me, is one of the reasons why we exist. I started TrustRadius because we picked an HR platform, cost us $200,000, and my last company, rolled it out to 450 people, and realized it was a bad functional fit for us. The product is a good product. It was a leader in the Gartner MQ, but the reality was that we were a tech vendor, and something that was really important to us was not supported by that product. And a Gartner Magic Quadrant doesn't delineate between whether you're a tech vendor or a manufacturing company, whether you're a mid-market company or an enterprise. It's a one-size-fits-all model. And the references we talked to were not similar to us. So again, the power of reviews is helping the buyer connect to people who are like them, who are in the same shoes, who have the same use case. And again, not every product is going to be a good fit for everyone. So part of what you're trying to do as a brand is to make sure the people who are a good fit for your solution pick you. And if someone sees a negative review because of the feedback of someone that's in a different industry, that had a use case that was exceptional, that didn't fit them, that's a positive thing if they're steered away. Because recruiting clients who are ultimately going to churn is just a very, very costly endeavor.
Awesome. Very interesting. Let's talk about you for a little bit. I read that you've actually led companies through 2 recessions. So you have some experience in having to really shift priorities during tough times. How has your past past experience really helped you lead the TrustRadius team during this pandemic?
Yeah, so interestingly, we were at a management offsite when the sort of news around COVID and just how serious it was going to be in the US really hit us. And the first thing that we did, of course, was to make a decision that we were all going to work from home starting the next week. But a few immediate priorities came to mind. One was we knew that we needed to get super close to our customers. We've always been an extremely customer-centric company. It's in our DNA. But we knew that with the health crisis, there was going to be an economic crisis, and that every investment that a company was going to make would be under scrutiny. And so we wanted to make sure that we were touching our customers frequently. We were being really good partners. We were going the extra mile to help. In some cases, giving additional free services just to help companies through these times, to weather these downtimes, and that we were seen to be an engaged partner. So that work has really borne dividends in a few ways. We're actually beating our retention targets for the first half. We beat them quite considerably, and we're well ahead of our plan, because I think it was a forcing function to get super close to our customers. And in addition to the external engagement with customers, we produced a lot of new operating motions internally, where we met daily to review accounts with our client success team, a different person each day. We started to forecast retention four quarters ahead and really get ahead of every account. We built success plans for every customer and made sure those success plans were bought into by the customer. So we knew what the goalposts were for success, and we knew whether we were going to hit them or not. So that discipline of focusing on the customer is really number one and super critical. Now, with that also came revenue opportunity. In a recession or in a difficult economic crisis like this, winning new logos is really, because people are loath to spend money. They're even more loath to spend money with a new vendor where they don't know what they can expect. Conversely, if brands are going to spend money, they're going to spend money with people they trust and already have a relationship with. So we put an added focus on trying to drive expansion amongst our existing install base. And that strategy, again, has really paid dividends for us. We came in at 164% of plan in Q2. And that's not a post-COVID plan. That is a pre-COVID plan that we set at the beginning of this year. And a large part of that was driven by expansion at some of the biggest tech companies in the world, who are just seeing a lot of value in TrustRadius and want to use us across their portfolio of products. And the third thing that we did from a go-to-market perspective was really make sure our messaging was relevant for these modern times. Now, thankfully, we're an industry that, for the most part, has weathered this storm. It's not like the restaurant or the hospitality industry. The tech industry has been fairly resilient. Obviously, there are pockets of the tech industry that have been hit hard, who sell to certain sectors. But what we did was make sure that our messaging was tuned and as relevant as possible for these current times. So speaking to things like the fact that we're in a digital first world and how the buyer's journey has changed. It's important to meet buyers where they are. Speaking to the importance of trust and how, without face-to-face sales interactions, harnessing your customer's voice is a way to invoke trust with your prospects. And then speaking to the power of intent data and how that can be used to understand buying cues, where you can't meet someone at a physical event. You can't read them as well as a face-to-face interaction. Whereas this intelligence gives you a lot of insight into purchasing propensity. So again, increasing the relevancy of our messaging, not changing it fundamentally, but just tuning it to be more and more relevant for these times. So that's what we've done on the go-to-market side. The other side of things as a CEO is, how do you lead a team through these challenging times, right? That's an ongoing effort. It's really, it's really difficult, is the blunt truth. I've gotten better at communications. I used to show up to my weekly all hands meeting with a few bullet points, unscripted. Now I spend the weekend before building a presentation, making sure my management team is ready on call to deliver their piece. We have a much more scripted presentation. We do a lot more pulse check-ins with our employees. We use a tool called 15-5 to ask how they're doing on a bunch of fronts. We ask them different questions each week. Think of them as mood surveys, but also, how we're doing. We've also done systematic surveys on specific issues. Some of them actually driven by our employees. So we have a number of employees who have children or parents, and they're caretaking through this crisis as well. So we've tried to understand what they're going through. We've also initiated a once a month self-care day where people just can rest and go out into nature, go for a hike, or maybe just work less and have no phone calls and distractions and just have some time for themselves to decompress. So those mental health issues are really important. But I think it's just about being attuned to your employees, just as you are attuned to your customers, listening, communicating, and just really having a good pulse. And that's what I think has been essential to kind of lead through this crisis is, again, just to be a really good listener and to stay close to your customers and stay close to your employees.
I love that. And now talk to me about your role as CEO of TrustRadius. How long have you been in the role, and what have been some of your top priorities and key learnings so far?
Yeah, so I started TrustRadius in 2012, and I've always been the CEO since then. We incubated the company, we bootstrapped for a year, raised venture capital in 2013, and have really treated it like a marathon, not a sprint. Meaning we're very methodical with how we've built our business, one layer at a time, not trying to rush things. Maybe the truism, the tortoise wins the race or the turtle wins the race. It applies to us that we haven't tried to rush things. We've just tried to be extremely methodical, building up our business one layer at a time and making sure that our unit economics make sense, making sure that we've got a really good culture. Now, as to key lessons or key things that we try to drive, the thing that really sticks with me is the importance of company culture. A crisis like this really exposes your culture. And thankfully, we have built a highly collaborative culture. I've got great individual players on my team. I've got smart people. I've got strong leaders. And of course, the quality of those people is critical. But what delineates one company from another is how your team rallies together and collaborates in a time of crisis, and to just get the job done. One of my favorite books, it's not really a leadership book, but it's more of a historical book. It's a book called Boys in the Boat. It's a story, a real life story based upon the University of Washington rowing team on the West Coast. Back in those days in the 1930s, the schools that used to win kind of the boat races were Harvard and Yale and, all the Ivies or the military schools. Washington was this ragtag group of boys, from poorer backgrounds, didn't have the same equipment, didn't have the same, amenities and coaches as the rest of the country. But the reason why they ended up becoming the US national champions was they worked harder and they worked together. Rowing, I'm not a rower, but I just like the analogy. In rowing, if you have one person who's, off kilter, the boat doesn't move as fast. And it is all about, again, courage, tenacity, working together and rowing together that makes you win. And that team went on to win not just the US championships, but also the Olympics in Berlin in 1936, which was just epic. And to me, that story is very kind of emblematic of what I'm trying to build at TrustRadius, where we have a great group of hardworking individuals, but we row together and we row together in synchronicity. And oh, by the way, that doesn't happen naturally. You have to work really hard on that. Even to this day, I'm working a lot. I have an executive coach who comes in and helps my management team, where we meet on how we're working together and how we're managing performance, how we're managing accountability, how we're communicating, how we're running our meetings, because you have to work on it. And it doesn't just happen. But when it does happen, when you have that collaboration occur in your company, it's absolutely beautiful because you see all of these amazing synergies occur between teams. you find that as a leader, you can kind of almost set back and just watch beautiful things happen. You don't have to manage them and dictate them. They're happening more organically and naturally because you built a strong culture.
And that kind of also, just ties into, in general, having that cross-organizational alignment to really deliver exceptional experiences for buyers and prospects and your customers. So that's awesome. Are there any specific like platforms or tools that you guys are using to really collaborate more? Or is it your standard Slack, Zoom, anything new?
Yeah, we recently started using Asana as a project management tool in customer success, and that's been a game changer for that function specifically. In terms of cross-company collaboration, certainly Slack is immensely helpful. 15.5 as a way to understand employee sentiment. We also do OKRs. We use 15.5 for OKRs, and each department finds their own. Engineering has a set of tools that they use to coordinate as well. But for me, I think it really comes down, again, more so than tools, to just being kind of creating consciousness about how we want to engage with each other, not just doing so with respect, but a sense that the support of the whole is more important than the support of the individual. What I mean is that sometimes an individual will need a compromise on their own KPIs to support the greater good of the company. And we see people willingly do that because we've trained them that it's not just acceptable to do that, but rewarded. And, just creates really, really good behavior when you've kind of created that culture where everyone understands what our mission is. Everyone understands what our goals and kind of company level objectives and key results are. And everyone feels like they're rowing towards that. And therefore, what you're really doing is creating a culture where people feel empowered and there's delegated decision-making responsibility. Very few decisions should be made by me. And, we're not there fully, but we're striving to get to that point where we've got a very empowered organization that feels armed, educated, and empowered to make the right calls. And to me, that's even more important than any tool. The tools are enablers that layer on top of that, but it's really the culture that's most important.
Absolutely. And since the title of the series is CXO Conversations, I always like to ask, what type of conversations are you having with other leaders in the space? What are some questions you're hearing, any priorities, or even like stress levels? What's that going like with other leaders that you're kind of having different, whether LinkedIn or just phone conversations with throughout the past few months?
Yeah, I've been very lucky to be part of a CEO group called 10X CEO now for the last 2 years. It's a group based in Silicon Valley, but the CEO group I'm part of distributed through the world. We've got guys in Belgium, in the UK, East Coast, West Coast, etc. We meet once a quarter and compare notes in a very, very structured way. And again, having that channel to be able to really go deep with each other, help each other, has been just immensely helpful. I'd say the challenges are all over the board. Certainly, I'd say managing employee morale through these times is something that's on all of our minds. It's really easy to assume that everyone's just doing okay. I have kids, I have a dog, I'm married, so I have people around me, but I've got young employees who are isolated and are feeling lonely and cut off from people. And, understanding what they're going through is very different to just, understanding what others are going through on my team. We have had people who've lost family members as well. So again, understanding those mental health challenges is really important. And that's on all of our minds right now, just understanding how do you lead through these circumstances? How do you make people feel comfortable, secure, psychologically safe? A few months ago, there was a lot of anxiety about whether people would lose their jobs. We just didn't know how bad this recession was going to be, how much it was going to impact the tech industry. So understanding how you communicate to people to make them feel psychologically safe is really, really critical. I would say, other things that people have grappled with is, where do you place your bets, right? If most companies have been measured with their spending. Like, when COVID hit, we froze hiring for a while. We're now hiring again. And we cut discretionary marketing expenses and some other discretionary expenses. We're now starting to turn the tap back on. So how aggressive do you be? How do you forecast? How long is this crisis going to last for? And what form will it take? Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of crystal balls. So we're just, we're validating with each other how to think about how to plan the future. We made a decision to actually accelerate sales hiring in Q4. And, I don't know if that's the right decision, but we're placing our bets there right now and trying to read the tea leaves as they come in. So it's really helpful, again, to have a network of CXOs that you can bounce those ideas off of, as well as, of course, having, again, a culture where you can have frank and honest debate. I don't believe that CEOs are omniscient. I believe that they've got teams who should be able to challenge them and question assumptions. We have to break ties and make the final decisions. But again, I lean on my management team a lot to help me make these tough decisions.
Awesome. Any parting words on, what you believe will be the future of software reviews and client feedback for B2B organizations, or just in general, what's next for TrustRadius before we sign off today?
Yeah, I'm biased, of course, but I believe that, this is the future. It's common sense. We as consumers would not make a purchase of any material nature in our lives today without understanding what our peers think. I'm remodeling my house right now, and every piece and component we look to buy, a mirror. I look at the consumer reviews. Does it have, is it durable? Does it have a good frame? What's the glass quality like, etc. And that's for a few $100 purchase, let alone a piece of tech that's going to run my business, for years to come, hopefully, and that's going to impact my operations. So buyers, of course, are looking for this kind of information. And the data suggests that they're doing it in droves. Our survey, the B2B Disconnect, which we publish each year, said that last year, 52% of buyers were using reviews in their diligence process. And that isn't just SMBs, it's large enterprises too. In fact, the figures at large enterprises are even higher. We're also learning that buyers are doing a good proportion of their research digitally now, and COVID and work from home have made that even more exacerbated. And a lot of what they're trying to do is find independent sources of truth that can validate the claims that they're hearing from vendors, or to perhaps find alternative solutions that they don't yet know and are not on their list. So it's kind of like an inevitable where buyers are using platforms like TrustRadius in droves. We have more than 1 million people on our site every month, and half of those are from large enterprises. And we've grown almost 300% in the last 12 months. So this is definitely a major trend. And frankly, any vendor who's not already thinking about it needs to, because this is the way that buyers are buying. It's inevitable. It's just, and to not be represented, to not have a solid presence, to not put your best foot forward is almost neglectful. The second thing I would say is that because buyers are still relying on information from brands a lot, they do spend time on brands' websites, email communications, and sales interactions, that invoking trust with those buyers in your own channels by harnessing the voice of the customer is also kind of a no-brainer strategy. Some of the companies now who've worked with us for many years, and leaders who've worked with us now at multiple companies, like Thomas being the CMO of Druva, who was the CMO of Tibco, one of the first things he did when he went to Druva was bring us in, because he just knows instinctually, doesn't even need to see the conversion metrics, he just knows instinctually that as a marketer, no one's really going to believe your claims outright. You need to validate them. And the best way to validate them is through the words of your customers in a way that's authentic and trustworthy and people can relate to. And again, I would say the third opportunity is in a world where marketing budgets maybe are under more scrutiny than ever before, using intent data, using methods to concentrate your advertising on buyers who really are indicating propensity to buy is absolutely critical. And I think this is a burgeoning area. Most companies are fairly unsophisticated in this area right now. But I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of innovation in the next 3 years on how to use engagement signals, intent signals to actually tune our marketing, train our salespeople to say the right things, like if you're, again, up against a specific competitor. And I think the real nirvana is when companies will be able to both use intent data and content from customers and connect those two things together to really create, personalized experiences for buyers to make them feel confident that they should spend time with that brand and engage, either buy or at least spend time with a salesperson. So again, I think it's absolutely inevitable. The time is now, and there's going to be a lot of exciting innovation in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, even just within our own internal research and different benchmarks that we do, we have our B2B buyer behavior study. Every single year, it's always, we want authentic, relevant information. We want to hear from our peers. So having these types of solutions like TrustRadius is definitely important. I could definitely see you guys just getting better and more successful from there. So thank you so much, Vinay. That's really all the questions I have for you. I really appreciate your time, and thanks to everybody watching. That's a wrap on another episode of our CXO Conversations. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye everyone. Stay safe.